see the world and sail the seven seas. Wanna be free, unveil some mystery. Ancient times have passed me by, the rules remain. Hold my heart under the open sky, but here life guides me to my destination. Sail set high, I pass the key. Easter and feast, they stood so silently. Faith in fools under the angel falls. They pursue it was.
Hello, Jeremy and Phil from the UK. Nice to see you both.
Nice to see you too, Thomas.
Thank you. So I have a couple main topics that I want to get into, and I think we'll dispense with any great long intros because I think anybody watching this probably knows who you guys are. My name's Thomas Dawson. I'm from Vancouver Island. I've been a truth seeker, as we call it, for at least 30 years, and I know that you guys have been looking at all this kind of stuff as well. But just briefly, Jeremy and Phil, for those listening to this, are one half of the Human Unleashed team. And if you watching this haven't watched the Human Unleashed series of videos, I highly recommend it because they just question the mainstream narrative of this whole COVID narrative in a very intelligent and reasonably mature way. So I can't say
it's
that.
Nice of you to say so, Thomas.
I can't say that I've heard you guys say anything that I really disagree with. I'm right on board with all that. And we'll discuss a little bit about that kind of stuff today. But I also have a question that I want to get to eventually that I don't hear a lot of the mainstream YouTubers talking about. And that is and we'll get into this later, but the question it will be, what if things really go full on tyrannical like it's starting to look like it will in Australia? Anyhow, we'll save that for a little bit. First question I have for you guys is something that really surprised me. Did you see Freely the Banana Girl's video where she's actually questioning the whole mainstream narrative of all this?
No, I haven't seen that one. Have you seen that one, Jeremy?
No, since I stopped eating bananas a long time ago, I equally don't really drawn to Freely the Banana Girl, and but I wish her all the very best because I really think she's probably going to need that kind of help.
Yeah. I saw somebody had posted up some video about her recently where they said, has she actually got dementia? And I was going to watch it, but I didn't. But there's so many other things to watch. I've kind of lost track of that whole vegan thing. But yeah, I just posted something on my Facebook though, where I said, look, to all the vegans and vegetarians who've argued with me all these years, I've noticed a lot of you have seen through this whole thing and seen this Bill Gates thing and seen that his vax are probably very dangerous and he's not to be trusted. Do you know he also pushes plant-based diets? Any more questions? It was like, it seems daft to me that they're seeing through that and not through the other. I did a video for Vernon Coleman yesterday that I put on my YouTube channel.
I saw that. That was excellent.
Oh, thank you. I was just inspired to do it because, I was listening to one of his wonderful videos and then in the middle he's going on about how dangerous butter is. I'm like, come on, Vern.
I noticed those things as well.
Yeah, but that's quite an important point, isn't it, Phil? Because there are many people that have got lots of aspects right. And if there's anything I would say particularly unique about the Human Unleashed team, which is myself, Phil, Graham Norbury and Ben Hunt, and occasionally our publisher, John Gusty, it's actually that we've all come down roads of knowledge from different angles, but we've all commonly trained ourselves to being open to being wrong, whereas it seems that people like Freely, and I don't know her, and if she ever gets to listen to this, which I doubt, no doubt she'll do a video on what a quack I am or something, because that seems to be the way to attack and destroy. But it seems to me that these kinds of people are not open to being wrong. And if we hadn't been open to being wrong over 30 years of looking at things, I honestly wouldn't have got to where I am now and the successes that I enjoy now. And it's been degrees of, one, critics would say he's been wrong in the past. I would say degrees of less right, but always with looking for, not only looking, but incredibly open to any information on any subject I believed was correct, especially if it challenged me on that subject. So we won't attack. We'll go, my God, that's interesting. Why would you say that? And I think that's healthy. And if you look at the current, scandemic that's going on the planet currently, and if you're listening and not aware of that, you'll probably think that's quite offensive, but it is. That theme is particularly running through the entire media right now, which is absolutely destroy anybody in systemically professional or fringe professional or anybody else that questions a narrative. It is not, oh, that's interesting, why would you say that? It is destroy their character, or in some cases like Australia and others, actually physical force to stop people even questioning. Now that should be red flags to any reasonable human being, in my view.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's so exciting being wrong, isn't it? I mean, on my website, I put a blog post up years ago about the importance of being wrong, because that is the excitement, isn't it? When you find out you're wrong about something, it's like, ooh, what's coming next? That's great. I've never understood this real adherence to a dogma. I mean, vegans attack me and say I'm completely wedded to this carnivore thing. But if I find something that's better, fantastic. Just at the moment, I've gone through every single diet and whatever and come to carnivory, and it seems to work better than anything else, but still making tweaks, still wrong about certain things, within carnivory even. And I love that. We have a friend called Elliot Overton who we've interviewed for the Human Unleashed. And he's wonderful. He spends his time treating people who have failed on a carnivore diet. And it's usually from some lack of nutrient that they haven't been able to balance coming from some other awful diet. But it's not just a matter of eating meat. And so many people say that, and then they get stuck in that dogma as well. And that's starting too within the carnivore movement. But it is so strong in the vegan movement. It's very difficult to shift that, and I just never understood it. I never understood this thing. I love that that quote by Wayne Dyer, ignorance is complaining or slamming something that you don't understand and refusing to investigate. Well, I've butchered that, but my other favorite quote is Ram Su, bring me your dearest held beliefs and with any luck you'll leave without them. And it's so lovely to be stripped of beliefs if you find something beyond that. I feel we're horribly held back as humans if we just hang on to beliefs and don't move forward. And if somebody can prove to me that even carnivory, which I seem to be known for, is there's something far better, then brilliant, bring it on. But I just get vegans saying, and it's not veganism. So I'm not closed-minded, guys, vegans, I've just been there. So,
well, before I say the next thing to sort of support that, I was going to say in reference to being wrong, I thought I was wrong once, but it turned out I was mistaken, and that's one of my favorite jokes of all time. But anyway, I think the intention is, a lot of the religions, a lot of the ancestral stuff, or a lot of the tribal stuff is focused on the actual intent. So I think there's a lot of people out there that they get invested. I'm not saying they're bad folks. There's definitely corrupt folks in the system, and you really need to look at, the age-old who benefits, and, the old investigative journalism technique, follow the money, who benefits, and so to speak. But I think there's a lot of very good people out there that set out to find truth, and they find some things, as we probably have along the way, and they become very invested in it. And I think someone like Freely, not that I want to really talk about Freely, it seems to me that Freely has built a public persona, a business, and much more of it. So it's very challenging for her to entertain anything different than her current thoughts. That, I think, is the problem right now. The main public, because the system loves to treat you like a 10-year-old, and basically a 10-year-old is still an A or B, black or white kind of answer. So out there in the great public, the great unwashed public, the common people, so to speak, you either believe that there's a killer pathogenic virus destroying the world and it's absolutely everywhere and you can't see it. And if you don't follow what I call the tele-vision tells you, then you're putting everyone at risk. Or you're in the other camp, which is there's something very suspicious about this, or all the way up to the levels that maybe we'll discuss today, which is there is no pathogenic invisible virus that has been proven to exist by scientists that you will never see on your tele-vision.
That is right. So putting my 2 cents worth into this, I actually did a video, and in case you didn't know it, to Jeremy, I was a clinical certified hypnotherapist at one point back in the 90s. And so I've studied mind control quite a bit, and even the extreme stuff, trauma-based mind control. So I did a video where I explained in basic ways how people are literally getting programmed, because when mainstream media starts talking about things that scares people, when you're in fear, you're in hypnosis. And when you're in hypnosis, you're open to suggestions. And if you have people that know how to enter those or imprint those suggestions upon people's minds, which they absolutely do, you have a perfect recipe to program most of the world with a bunch of, as you call it, lies via the tele-vision. And so
I think it has to be a fundamental place before any discussion on any subject that is perceived to be established in the public mind. In fact, I was taught quite early on, if the public is aware that this thing is established, it's probably wrong and is worthy of looking into. But so the place I would start there is, the basis of mass mind control. And if you even think that this isn't being used to sell products and the rest of it, let alone for nefarious agendas, you're very, very mistaken. And you ought to go and look into a long documentary called Century of Self, where it shows the level of psychology that's been employed to sell you stuff you don't need. But the basis of mass mind control is repetition. And so my red flags always go up the moment the tele-vision starts repeating things over and over. Think about it. I mean, I don't know how young you are, Thomas, but when I'm 51, when I was a boy, the news was on a couple of times a day, right? And in the morning, I don't think it was even the morning, maybe on the radio, but certainly evening news we all watched. The news at 10 in England was great. Now it's on every 15 minutes or 30 minutes, and it's repeating the same thing over and over and over again. And most people that are listening to radios, quite a lot of people throughout the day, they're not even really listening, but it is going in. And so if you say something enough times, most people begin to believe it. Why would they question it until they've questioned the very people who are informing us? And that's a joke, because it most certainly isn't informing us. And unless we start there, we really can't get on to the next level of the subjects, because we have to question the integrity of the information being given to us, especially when any dissenter, which is their words, not mine, are so brutally character assassinated, ridiculed, and written off when they dare to question or slow down the process of a developing story. That's another one. They're all runaway trains. And people literally can't keep up with the speed of the information changing. They just can't emotionally keep up with that. So you're absolutely right about hypnosis. And again, I bring my dad into it. You only have to watch a child or anyone who's been watching a TV from the side, and you'll see they go into a hypnotic state. You could speak to them and they won't hear you. What? It literally is. So it's very, very important stuff that people fundamentally understand, that this is going on day in, day out of our normal lives.
It is a funny thing when you turn on the TV news like I do, to just with the sole intention of what are they lying about today. It's not even slightly what's the news, what's going on. It's how can I see through that? How many layers of absolute nonsense are there over the top of that? If somebody's in a room somewhere, are they in a room? Are they in an airplane? Are they you have no idea what's going on. except today, it drove me nuts, and I've ranted to the boys already about this today and on Facebook. But when they brought up the deaths in the care homes, you know, and they're finally coming round to it on the BBC, and they've got this smarmy attitude of, oh, isn't it lovely that we're bringing all this up, and look at these stories we're bringing to you of all these poor people who've been kept apart and people who've been dying on their own. I mean, we were talking about this on the Human Unleashed back in March, April. It was so obvious. As soon as there was any report out of Spain that there was deaths at care homes, it was obviously, it's like, okay, the carers are running away, they're scared, they're left neglected, they're going to die. And this is what's been happening in every care home. And for them to just be picking up on this, and I was saying to the boys, you know, if they were true journalists, how many lives they could have saved if they just picked up on that back then and blown the whistle on this nonsense. Go in and hug your granny, you know, you're not going to kill her. It's been amazing to see what's going on. And I mean, some of the stuff you sent me, Thomas, I'm sure Jeremy's more up on it than I am, you know, already, but it's shocking what might be coming. I still, for anybody listening, thinking we're going to go into horrendous negativity, I think there's a lot to watch out for. But I think Jeremy will agree that we're still pretty positive that this is, you know, the squeezing of the zit, the hatching of the egg. You know, it could end up in a really beautiful place, but it's going to be a rough ride and a fantastic show.
It is a rough ride for many. I mean, I'm been inundated since the beginning of intelligent people very scared, and I think just to sort of complete the media thing, and I like to say this in interviews, when I set out 30 years ago, excuse me, to help heal man's diseases, I actually believed 30 years ago there would be a course or some established college or something somewhere where they've really nailed it, and all you need to do is find that course and study it, and then go out there and with this wonderful intent to help mankind. And very early on, as many people who are like me find out, those courses don't exist. And for the better part, actually, the knowledge that you're after is very well protected and hidden. And you know, if you start to find that knowledge, you start to get quite pushback because it's going to affect a lot of people. When you come across things like this early on, you have to start asking why. So we didn't set out to think that there was agendas going on higher up to prevent man from thriving and from healing terrible diseases and from becoming wealthy, and famines to end and wars to. We didn't go out thinking like that, because some of our critics consider us or criticize us as just conspiracy theories, which just annoys the hell out of me, because as you probably know, conspiracy theory came from the CIA when people started to question how JFK was actually murdered because the top of his head blew off and he was shot from up here. So how that doesn't quite work. And the silence then, the conspiracy theory, well, you know, that's fine. But conspiracy theory is just that. You could be a theory about anything, question anything, but you should be able to question anything. The question is there any credible evidence to suggest that this may be more than a theory? And once you find that, you have to then change it to, well, then this is a potentially a conspiracy possibility. And if you find overwhelming information that you can validate to your own satisfaction, then it's a conspiracy. And unfortunately, we are living in a time where corporate interests, and let's keep it at that level for this conversation, have pretty much taken over the place, absolutely have no interest in truth and the furtherance of real knowledge to heal disease or end famines or all the rest of it, all these wonderful humane things that most people are interested in. Their only interest is to keep their powerful and wealthy positions, while the rest of us go around in fearful chaos trying to fight for the scraps of what is left, and by giving an awful lot of our time in between that. Most of us are working our butts off to stay still, and we get a few hours in the evening to try and look at stuff. Well, most people don't even want to do that. They just want to put the television on, phase out of their very difficult lives, forget about all the terrible things going on in the world and just watch a movie or Netflix. So it's very, very important that if you're hearing people like us speak like this, that it was never our intention to question these things. It just became unavoidable when you found that if Phil and I can find, we're just ordinary men, Phil's a little bit special needs at times, but basically ordinary men, if we can find this knowledge that actually heals people of their worst possible conditions, so can everyone else. So you have to question why. And so that ventures you out into all the other things that have prevented mankind from living in peace, flourishing, and doing what comes natural in my experience of traveling worldwide, which is actually being lovely human beings to each other.
Well, what I'd like to add from my perspective is that I've been to Colombia quite a few times, and I met a indigenous group down there. I'll call them the Tairona. And these people live up in the mountains on the Atlantic coast, and they live in complete harmony with nature. They have zero technology. And I was very fortunate enough to find a guide who was able to take me to one of their villages, and I met one of their apparently highest shaman. And what struck me is that they were just so authentic. Every one of them was slender and looked pretty healthy. Even the older people had completely dark hair. They all had really long hair. They all dressed in these white natural, because everything they made literally was all out of all what came from nature. And of course I was thinking, you know, they don't have a banking system, they don't have stores, they don't have any of the stuff that we're so used to. And when I was younger, there was just something inside of me that looked at society and said, this is all insane. We have to work 5 or 6 days a week, 9 to 5, and be told when we have to show up and when we can take our breaks. We have to pay ever increasing huge amounts of money for a plot of rock and dirt to build a house on. And that's what people's lives are consisting of, is paying off all this debt. And it just seemed absolutely nuts to me from even a younger age. But
it is insanity. But if you're born into it and they know this, if you keep the lie going generationally, the generation we have now, which is not really full of rebellious teenagers or young men and women questioning much, then they accept this as normal. This is not normal. This is abnormal. So when they talk about the new normal, they're talking about the new improved abnormal. In fact, we've just finished writing, it's about to be published, a wonderful book, and I do say it because it is a wonderful book, called The Red Pill Revolution, which is addressing all the aspects we believe are the key ones of how we got here, and that progress very frequently isn't progress, and how we can start addressing that as individuals.
Going back to the reason I brought up Freely the Banana Girl, which I don't subscribe to her, I want to promise you guys that. The video just popped up and it said that she was questioning things. So the main reason I brought it up, however, was that I'd like to urge people, if you are vegan or carnivore or any point in between, that if you do see through the narrative, I think we have a much bigger collective thing that it would be important to focus our attention on, aside from whether veganism is better or keto or carnivore diet. What's going on right now. And I say this, living on Vancouver Island, for instance, we have people who protest the logging of the giant old growth trees. All that's great, but right now we have such a serious situation. I'd say that it's time for us to all speak up and collectively talk about this whole scamdemic, plandemic, because as you know, the global manipulators, they have the pedal to the metal, and time is kind of the essence right now. So that is the main reason I brought that up.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've had this thing. It's just, it's very difficult when you get into some kind of a cult and get that kind of brainwashing thing, because, the veganism goes way beyond a diet. And I've tried many times. I had a what do you call it? A debate in Liverpool live with a young vegan that a friend of ours, Janine Azalea, who has a great Facebook group with a lot of very good stuff in there. Anyway, she set this thing up and I went along, and Jeremy was there as well, actually. And it was just impossible. I set off with the intention of saying, hey guys, let's not fight about this, eat what the hell you like. Let's just bring vegetables down from their pedestal and realize there's a few problems with them. And let's get meat out of the gutter and realize that it is actually perfectly okay. But this is why I think that veganism is really part of the whole agenda. You can look back in history and you can find out how they've fed people this kind of stuff to make them pretty impressionable and just cannon fodder, really. And once you get this business, this moral superiority, it's just another way of dividing us. And I love it. I don't care if somebody's keen. Well, they can do what the hell they like. I'm not going to come down on them like that. I shall say, listen, it's probably not particularly good for you, but if you really like it, then eat it. But I don't think anybody really likes vegan food. Every time anybody stops, they just love their food again, and they stop pooing every 5 minutes and all of that. So it's the way that they cleverly get you into a belief. And I see it again now with the masks, and I see it again with, these sort of cults and these things where you can sort of herd people together. I avoid using the word sheep because it's kind of, again, it's a little bit derogatory. I understand why people use it, but I'd rather not do that. When I walk around the supermarket now and I'm the only one without a muzzle on, and I will use the derogatory term for a mask because it's a fucking piece of cloth and there's no reason why we can't call it a muzzle, right? Because that's what it is. And I'm sick of people going, oh, that's inflammatory language. No, it's not. It's a muzzle, So I walk around, I'm the only one in there. This all the time. I laugh when they try and give me one at the door, when I hand one out, which is just funny because it's just, no one's forcing you here. They just, where I am, they just hand you the muzzle and you just burst out laughing, and they do generally. We've got it very easy right by where I am, but I just feel so sorry for them. I just want to hug them and wake them up and just, come on guys, don't be frightened, for goodness sake. And I was saying as well to the boys today that it would be very interesting to have them color coded so that you could see who was, just 2 colors of masks, so that you could see who was wearing them just because it's easier. Oh, well, it's easier, or the people who really are frightened. And then I think we might see a hell of a difference. And they wouldn't get fined. You can't fine people for that. Oh, they'll probably end up, the yellow color are for people who don't really believe in it, but fine. Now yellow masks are banned because they don't stop the virus. I can see it now. You'd believe anything that would come up on TV now. But some way to somehow solidify the people who are waking up about this and who don't want to be militant and attack the other ones, and just all these arguments. And it's exactly what they want, isn't it? As Jeremy's always talking about, the sort of divide and rule and, the art of the obvious now. I don't know why people can't see it. Very strange.
Yeah.
Well, the key, it's go ahead.
I just wanted to quickly mention that I just got a notice saying that the 40-minute recording limit has been removed, so we don't have to worry about that, at least for now.
That's correct.
You go ahead.
Yeah, cool. I saw that. Yeah, that's lovely.
Yeah, well, the thing is, you see, for people like myself, this current scamdemic, because it is, and maybe we'll discuss why we say such things during this podcast. This is a pinnacle of being primed for many years. So we saw it coming. Hence why the humanunleashed.com COVID-19 reports, which we started in March, and I think we've done 20 episodes now. We've been shown that pretty much every question that we raised has been correct or on the money, pretty much everything. And the reason we've been able to do that is because we know the modus operandi of how these bigger corporate entities with agendas that do not benefit mankind operate. And they operate beyond most people's comprehension, because most people ordinary folk can't imagine that there are actually people scheming at high levels to put them at disadvantage and themselves at advantage. So, when you look at what's going on, if you've never questioned the television news and your newspaper, if you've never actually questioned the authenticity of that reporting, and if you have no idea of the owners and where the money comes from. So, for example, 20 odd years ago, probably 30 now, I watched Noam Chomsky's Manufacturing Consent and read his book, which was back then a newspaper because 60–70% of it is advertising revenue space in a newspaper, and similarly on a TV and radio. And so there is absolutely no way an editor is going to print anything derogatory against any one of the advertisers, which were normally the big corporate pharmaceuticals, chemical giants, cleaning products, food giants, that sort of thing. Absolutely no chance anyone will report anything because they'll lose their revenue. So that's back 30 years ago. And so the same goes, 9/11 happened. I think for a large proportion of people, it was for me, something snapped in you where you went, something's not right there. And that was the first time I looked at an official narrative. Now, I would imagine your audience, most people have looked into the official stories of 9/11 still held by the world press. And yet my 12, he was 12 when he looked, he's now 15. My 15-year-old can look at several documentaries off of his own volition to be asked about what they've been telling us about this. So not even making a statement. Now, if you get to that point with the 9/11 story, a global story to this day that hasn't been questioned through the global media any differently, and you can come away going, you know what? Not only are there serious questions, there are damn right major holes, along with over 1,000 architects and engineers now saying the official story is so ridiculous that it's fiction. Once you get to that point, you recognize that the mainstream media around well, if they're lying about this or refusing to look at this, what makes you think they're doing a good job in any other subject that they're informing you about? And for me, that was a really big moment to start to question what I'm being told, and more importantly, from who's choosing the information, and why do they have to ram it down my throat 24/7 for me to believe it? Because it just isn't investigative journalism in the mainstream now. It's all happening by citizen journalists, ordinary folk. The same in medicine, Phil. Some of the best breakthroughs in stubborn conditions such as autism, MS, arthritis, and so on and so forth, cancer, has come from ordinary people that got affected by it and then just researched and researched until they found, like Phil, a solution to their incurable issues. So all of this must be considered, because right now, otherwise, we're just two crazy blokes, the conspiracy theorists that want some airtime with Thomas on the internet talking shit because we haven't got anything better to do with our lives. And I assure you, if the world was run by rational people whose intents were actually to see the eradication of man's disease and famine and actual peace, we would be doing something else now.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it was a lot of things kind of half woke me up, but what really woke me up was the whole diet and medicine thing. It was obvious the utter nonsense that was going on. And now some people say to me, oh, you must turn on the TV and watch this diet program. Look, they've said bacon's all right. Something, And every now and again I will. Usually I'll just go, no, I can't. I just can't watch them anymore. Can't do it. And then somebody will fool me. No, this one is different. It's much more powerful than an outright lie. And so you'll get a TV program that will say, oh, actually, bacon is all right, and eggs are all right.
Yeah, so on the back of what Phil was saying, you know, and what most people are, how they're being informed and foolishly trusting without really questioning what they're being told from the television, or of course they have you with differing views arguing, but we have to sort of really look at science for a greater part. I mean, no one really wakes up in the morning and says, oh my God, we need a scientist. Not really. I mean, you need a plumber, you need a baker, you need a mechanic, you need a farmer, but no one ever really wakes up and goes, oh my God, you know, what about the scientist? Save the scientist. And I say that respectfully to any scientist that may be watching, because I have the greatest respect for science. And we've interviewed a very respectable scientist called Zoe Harcombe, one of the few left that are actually doing what would seem proper science. And that's what the point I'm getting to, is that unfortunately science has become the new religion, perhaps deliberately. And science really only exists if you're being funded to do science and research. And that is in the commercial, corporate areas of the world. And the basis is that studies, because these people will often say, experts say, or scientists prove, or studies show, or words of that effect, as they then go into this truth, or this truth, or this problem, or this what have you. And the public has been trained to not question that they may be compromised of who is funding that research, which is absolutely the case in 90% plus of science at the moment. Therefore, the actual research is hardly ever looked at. I mean, there are we know some very good doctors, and there's some very encouraging young doctors coming up that are pushing back and wanting to be doctors rather than systemic doctors and just giving up and, you know, prescribing the meds and doing what they're told, which is pretty much how it is now. And they will tell you that most doctors are not reading the research, the current research. I mean, I would think most patients think they're constantly reading the journals. They're not. They're certainly not reading the studies. And there was a famous study, I can't remember what it's called now, to be honest with you, where to prove that no one was reading the studies, they actually put in the middle of it, free case of champagne if you read this, if you ring this number. And no one ever rang the number. You know, they took that as proof that no one's reading it, you know. So when it says studies say, or scientists, experts or scientists.
Jeremy, that wasn't just people reading it, was it? It was actually when it was being peer reviewed. So it shows that the peer review, the peer review process is even a load of nonsense with a big network. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And even editors of serious journals are saying 50% of what is in here is wrong. Now, if you take that as a starting place and then extrapolate to the next level, how many people read studies? Well, Phil and I, to our great sins, because reading studies is absolutely hell, torturous. But when you do start to look at studies, you'll see all the holes in them. So, for example, there's a famous one out that what's her name in that brilliant doc? She's a psychiatrist that rips apart the study of cancer. Thank you. So, what's beautiful about someone who actually looks at that as just one example of, because why do I pick that example? Because most people out there educated by the television have heard that red meat causes cancer. I ask all the time, have you heard red? And they go, yes, I have. Funny you should say that, right? You know, but when you look at the study and how it was done, it turns out you take rats who are nocturnal creatures to begin with, you put them in an artificial light and feed them at day, which is not their natural time. So if I woke you up in the middle of the night, Thomas, slapped you about, put a bright light on and said, right, eat, you're not going to be a happy bunny. And we all know disturb someone's natural sleep cycles and they will get sick, right? It's banned by the Geneva Convention as torture. So you've got these rats eating at the wrong day, then they don't have their natural diet fed to them, and it's very, very unclear of what meat. Plus, and this is the real key, they injected them with cancer just to get the whole thing going. And then even then, after those tests would, well, they call them studies, it's a joke really, but they didn't find any cancer for them. They found some abnormal cell changes. No shit, Sherlock. If I wake you up every night, inject you with some cancer toxins or cells, and feed you your non-species specific diet, I'm pretty sure some of your cells are going to be a bit off. However, what the public gets to hear is studies show conclusively the meat causes cancer. It's not bullshit. It's criminal misinformation for an agenda for a corporate farm, wheat, grain, and medicine, because medicine would only be in business if there were sick people.
Absolutely.
So this is what we want to show you before we get on to what
I think that you know, the whole study thing. I mean, there is of course the other side of it, where they decided that they were going to study people as well, weren't they? So they used epidemiology, which is another ridiculous trick. And they found out that oh yes, meat causes cancer as well. And they were doing the studies on all the people who are eating McDonald's and whatever. And it's funny when you actually look at a McDonald's meal and you see that the only thing that is ancestral food in there is possibly that beef patty, and that's the only thing that they say causes cancer. Whereas you've got seed oils and grains and nightshade potatoes, and then you've got the drain unblocking Coca-Cola as well. And they've decided it's the beef patty. I mean, it's hilarious. This is the thing with the brainwashing. If just one little bit of logic, anyone would see that. You'd just go, oh yes. But if you've got this, what Jeremy says, it's endless repetition, 5 a day, this, that. Ah, yeah, the meat, that's the one. And then Greta's being killed by the burping cows. Brilliant tactic. So where's it all going, eh?
Yeah. So guys, in the interest of, I know we have some time restraints, there's 2 other topics that I'd like to cover if possible. And one of them is the germ theory as proposed by Dr. Stefan Lanka, Dr. Thomas Cowan, Dr. Andrew Kaufman, and others. And
you mean the terrain theory? The germ theory is Pasteur. The terrain theory is what Stefan Lanka and right. Kaufman. You said the germ theory, but you mean the terrain theory or pleomorphic theory? Yeah.
Right. Thank you for correcting me on that. So, yeah, you know probably more about this, Jeremy, than certainly than I do. I think it's one of the more important things, because that was as much as I've researched conspiracies and all that kind of stuff related to health as well. This was something brand new to me starting about 5 months ago as well. So it really opened up my eyes, and I've done a ton of research into it since, and it really makes a whole lot of sense. And I know you really like Dr. Stefan Lanka. And Dr. Thomas Cowan, he just put a brand new book out called The Contagion Myth, which, as I understand it from what he said, has already been banned from being sold on Amazon. So that should tell you something. So if you don't mind, Jeremy, would you mind talking a bit about this? So, because a lot of people won't know anything about this, but when you...
Can I just introduce Jeremy on this one in a way, just very quickly?
Absolutely.
That, you know, I'm the same as you. I'm kind of new to this. I sort of knew it for years, but I hadn't really looked into it. But as Jeremy explains this, if anyone's listening to this, just imagine, this is my fantasy, that this comes out and it's proved. Because this is the one thing that would blow everything apart. Nothing could stand up to this if the virus theory itself was rubbish. Can you imagine them all? Or if everybody knew that in the world, all the news channels just stopping, nobody having anything else to say, it would be a beautiful moment. So away you go, Jeremy, and tell everyone about it. This is brilliant.
Yeah, well, it's a huge subject, and it's a when you say proved, Phil, it has been proved, but I think it's been proved to the public's satisfaction.
Yeah.
But it's a prime example of how a lie is a lie, even if everyone believes it to be the truth, just as the truth is the truth, even if everyone believes it to be a lie. And what I was harking to earlier on about so-called established beliefs. So, you know, what's amazing is education, which I think is a joke in schools because it's more programming little robots and not to question and to keep in line, as far as I can tell. But education of even 30-year-olds down, they don't even seem to know about the germ theory, or never even heard of the name Pasteur, Louis Pasteur. So we have to sort of start there. But basically, back in the sort of 1800s, science was kind of like being a Hollywood star or a rock star. If you made it in science, you were kind of invited into the royal courts. Your career was sealed. You would live a very privileged life. So it was something to be very sought after. And of course, that attracts all kinds of characters who wish to advance their life and their social status and what have you. No different from now, except that they wear suits and are basically corporate usually. But anyway, at that time, there were two people, Louis Pasteur and Antoine Beauchamp. Now, I can almost guarantee that probably none of you have heard of Antoine Beauchamp. There was a few other characters as well. But basically, they were intellectual sparring partners of the time, shall we say. And they were very clever. I'll give that to Pasteur, because with their limited microscopes, they were at least observing something that they realized was unseeable by the human eye, and were questioning whether it had anything to do with people becoming sick. And to cut a long story short, although I encourage people to buy the book, it's got two titles actually. One's called Pasteur Exposed, and it's often sold also as Pasteur versus Beauchamp. But either way, it's out there as a free PDF as well. But nonetheless, they were looking at the same things, but Pasteur basically plagiarized Beauchamp's work because he wasn't as intellectually as mature and complete, I would say, and got it wrong. And he basically said that these things that he was looking at that we'll call germs, or he called germs, were found in the presence of disease. Therefore, they were causing disease. And that was the beginning of the germ theory. And therefore, that's what spawned modern medicine, which basically was, if germs cause disease, all we have to do is eradicate germs. There goes disease. Lovely jubbly. Beauchamp said the opposite. He said the germ is nothing, and the terrain or the environment is everything. Now, if it was true that bacteria caused disease, we should all have been wiped out years ago. I mean, if you own dogs, you will see dogs lick their butts and every other thing. Give them a fresh bone, they'll turn their nose up at it 9 times out of 10, go and dig a hole in the garden, bury it, and dig it out a couple of weeks later when it's absolutely rank, you know, and absolutely gnaw on it with glee and joy that you look at in a weird way. If bacteria cause disease, those dogs should have killed over dead years ago. They haven't. As matter of fact, you are more bacteria than human cells. Some say 95% bacteria, some say more, some say less. But the facts are, you are a walking bacterial colony more than human cells. And now we're even finding that mitochondria, where shall we say, truer advanced science is seeing that mitochondria, the energy factories of your cells, are actually derived from bacteria. I would arguably say they still are, but derived from bacteria. And these are the core reasons why people are falling into disease, because it's energetic dysfunction, and therefore the body doesn't work optimally, and so on and so forth. But back to here. But we are more bacteria than human cells. Well, how can that be if bacteria is our enemy? Well, again, the cynics will go, yes, but there's pathogenic bacteria. But when you actually look into it, they've never actually proven that these so-called pathogenic bacteria actually are causing the diseases. The studies are very, very unclear. So what's making people sick? Well, what you find is that these bacteria, and this has been documented way after Beauchamp and has been filmed, videoed by some very amazing people. Gaston Nissen is one of them, a French-Canadian scientist who developed a special microscope that could video these things because they're so small. The electron microscope doesn't do a very good job because you actually have to pretty much kill something to look at it through an electron microscope. So it's very often not seen in real time. But there's been several other scientists that have developed microscopes and then videoed it, including, I can't remember their names now, but I'll send it to you later on. The most recent ones, no, the name escapes me, but they've got a wonderful website showing their videoing of these things. And what they're showing is they actually morph into different species, not species, but different types of bacteria, down and up, depending on the environment. Now, this starts to make a lot of sense, particularly if you're a farmer or something like that. If you've ever come across anything that has died, you'll see that it decomposes from the inside out, not from the outside in. There'll be plenty of stuff on YouTube with fast frame photography where you see something decompose in about 5 minutes. It's decomposing from inside out. Now, what's changed? What's changed is the environment is changing rapidly once an organism has died. And we can talk another day what really death is, because there's still a lot of life processes going on once whatever animates that being has left. So as the environment changes internally, those bacteria start to proliferate and they start to change, and then they become what would be seen as pathogenic, but they're actually doing what they're designed to do, which is now decompose, eat dead or decaying organic material and release it back to the planet from whence it came. Because if we go to the other end of the scale of the beginning of life, we've all been formed from the physical components of this earth, calcium, magnesium, and so on and so forth, the minerals and so on and so forth. So it starts to make perfect sense. And then when you look at what's really causing disease and what bacteria are really doing when you think you have an infection, what they're really doing is acting more as a janitor. They're clearing up debris, disease cells, toxins, these sort of things. Now, when you see that to your own satisfaction, the old methods of healing make much more sense when they used to say manage a fever. You don't want to stop a fever. The fever is actually the body's attempts at healing. And now we have things like German New Medicine, which if you Google it, you'll find how that has been debunked. Absolute rubbish. A German oncologist showing that these active phases of what would be seen as the body in being ill are actually it trying to remedy it. And if you try and stop that, the disease is going to either progress worse or be suppressed and manifest somewhere else. So when you've introduced antibiotics, which have been claimed to be, one of the greatest things that mankind has ever discovered, yes, in part, but they're supposed to be used in a life or death situation. What they've actually done is suppress a whole heap of problems that have then manifested into much more serious cases. Think about it, right? If you ask anybody in the developed world in the last 50 years, has your nation got healthier or sicker since modern medicine has really taken over? Every single person knows the answer. It's sicker, much sicker. So something's not right. So when you start to look at the terrain theory, which is called the pleomorphic theory over germ theory, it makes sense. And the analogy we use is you have a fish tank, you have tropical fish in it, all varying different fish, which is really the cells, and you pollute the water and you turn the oxygen levels down, and all the sick start to develop all different types of problems. What medicine do you give the fish? Well, most people go, what are you talking about? You turn the oxygen back up, you turn the filter up, you clean the water, and see the fish will probably heal, and those that don't may need some help. That makes perfect sense. That's the terrain theory. And although it's been kind of muddied by a vegan detox to some people's minds, that I am absolutely guaranteeing you, you're not sick, you're toxic. They're finding God knows how many chemicals, industrial pollutants and pesticides in 90% of people's fatty tissue. In amniotic fluid of a baby being born, there's 200 chemicals. So these were never around. So the body is becoming polluted, and at differing times of year, which is why people get sick together, the body has attempts to get rid of it, and you will find more bacteria. And if you find the bacteria and take it out and go, that's the reason they're sick, you can understand why it's very seductive, but it's not. The bacteria is present because you're sick or polluted. And the same extends into viruses. Viruses, in fact, no one has even really identified viruses to my satisfaction in their entirety. And most of the world's like, what? I've seen the photograph. They're not photographs, they're computer-generated images. This latest one with big projecting sucky things. Oh, isn't that wonderful to put fear in? I mean, you can't get that bugger off you. It's literally, it's a computer-generated image. In fact, the artist was very proud to say that they've taken my image and using it to give you an image. Well, most people will be shocked to find that, because they genuinely believe that's what this bastard looks like. It's CGI, it's a cartoon. That's what it is. So when you extrapolate up into what viruses are, there are major, major holes submitted by very intelligent, far superior to my brain, who understand these things far better than me. But the facts are, there are basic standards to try and identify a virus from a human being. And they are that you are meant to take some fluid or blood or sputum or something, spin it at incredible speed, centrifugally. I'm not even sure I've got the word pronounced properly there, but you understand. And everything has different densities, so they separate into different levels. And when they separate into different levels by their density, you ought to be able to extract a whole virus, and then that's the isolation. So now you've isolated it, you look at it, you should be able to identify its entire genetic material, document it, now you've got a virus. Then you have to put that into a healthy human being or organism and see if it gets sick. And if it gets sick, you can then postulate this is a pathogenic virus, because you see, most people out there, I argue really the most, you don't need the word pathogenic even in front of it. Virus is enough. They're bad. No, they're not. So if you haven't proved it's pathogenic, and if you haven't proved it's pathogenic, and you haven't proved there's even a virus, what on earth are we even talking about at the moment? Because the current scamdemic, which has huge nefarious agendas behind it to change our global behavior and accept things that are unacceptable, which we'll talk about another day, but it's all out there for you to see. They're not hiding this, by the way, it's just not on your television, but it is there. They're telling you what they're doing. It's not hidden. Their wet dream of a utopian world where we have computers installed into us and are very, very obedient to the system with no cash, which we must never forget. But basically, the facts are, there has not been a virus properly purified, part one, then isolated, part two, and then shown to be pathogenic. Not one. CDC hasn't got that study. No one's got that study. No one has got that. And that's why I love Stefan Lanka, because he's saying no one's got it. And it's no point me doing these tests because you won't believe me. You won't even put me on the television. Let me come to your government's laboratories and video and observe them doing the tests. And then if they find it, then there we go. Now we can test it's pathogenic with me here. And if it's pathogenic, we've got a problem. Now, how do we treat it? But no one has, and no one will take him up on his offer. Does that not make even the most cynical brain question? And I need to say this, I'm sorry I'm stealing the show a little bit here, but this is really, really important. This whole way they've been operating has already been done many times. HIV was one of them. Fauci was at the head of it. The whole runaway train of HIV causes AIDS, the same thing. And the inventor, Karis Mullins, I think it is, Karis Mullins of the PCR test. Yes, Mullins. He said, when he did his test, he assumed, Nobel Prize winning scientist, he assumed there was a study proving this virus existed and caused AIDS. So he went to his peers and he went, listen, I'm just writing up a study or a paper, I need to cite which paper proves it. And they went, I'm not sure. And he went, oh, that's a bit odd. So he said, well, how did you get to know that HIV causes AIDS? And they said, the New York Times. And he was like, what? This is top scientists. So he then looked for it. There was no paper. It's all been worked on assumption, and then top scientists in a hierarchical system promote it. They give it to the monkeys in the government. The monkeys in the government give it to the media. The media repeat it, and the public swallow it. And it's been done on swine. It's been done on just about everything. And when you look at how much money was made out of AIDS and Fauci, you start to see a pattern. And this is exactly what is happening now, in my view. We have to stop this runaway train, go back calmly with credible people and go, let's do the basics properly. Let's see if we really do have a virus, which they haven't. They've done sequencing, which is basically like smashing a glass, collecting 50, 60, 70% of the pieces, putting it all together and extrapolating out that was a glass when you've never actually seen the glass in the first place. Okay, so that's what they've done. They've sequenced it. Let's find if there's a virus. Let's find if it's actually pathogenic. And if it isn't, the pandemic's done. Every piece of data is fraudulent. And if there is a pathogenic virus, vaccination is not the only, and most definitely from my point of view, from having looked at their fraudulent science in these areas, is not the only solution. There are way better ways to treat a virus if it's pathogenic, but it ain't.
Absolutely. If anybody's sitting there now listening to this thinking that's impossible, I always like to make a point after that, and that is that this has happened so many times in medicine and diet science and whatever. If you look at cholesterol and how one theory brought forward what's it called, the lipid hypothesis by Ansel Keys, a very corrupt researcher. And if you look at what happened there, and that he threw out all the inconvenient evidence and whatever, and he came up with this thing that has ruled our whole diet guidelines for 60 years. Now, only recently have people started to wake up to this. It's happened with other things in the body, like simple things. For example, uric acid has been blamed for gout, and it's not. It's the body trying to clear oxalates out. And so it's not the cause. It's again a paramedic at the road accident. And I think if we can see this, it becomes more credible that we've got virus theory completely wrong. If anybody wants to listen to it, I think it's episode 12 of Our Human Unleashed. We have a wonderful young doc on there called Josh Clifton, and he's on there, and he does some wonderful stuff on there of exposing all the craziness in the NHS, and he makes a great point. He has a background in virology as well, and he says, if we can't even decide, even understand what we're supposed to eat as a species, how are we going to understand virology that is literally trillions of times more complicated? So really now, when we look at what my friend Tristan calls the good grown-ups on the TV, how can we possibly trust them? Do we really think anybody is an expert on virology if we've forgotten what humans are supposed to eat for the last 60 years? I think that, look at it in that kind of light, and what Jeremy has just explained becomes an awful lot more credible for the average listener.
Okay, thank you so much for that great, thorough explanation, Jeremy. I really appreciate that. I know we're down to our less than even 15 minutes now, so there is one other topic that I want to try and squeeze in if we can. Might be asking a little bit too much, but one thing I've noticed is that most of the other YouTube channels that are doing their best to expose the whole pandemic, scamdemic, they don't seem to be talking about a worst case scenario. Now, I don't know if that's something you guys even want to speculate on, but I know that you guys are probably a little bit more optimistic than maybe I am. But when you see what's going on in Australia and what the Prime Minister of Australia is saying in regards to vaccines, which is that, to the best of my knowledge, they're not going to be mandatory, but if you don't get it, we're going to basically make life really, really difficult for you. You're not going to be able to travel. You might not be able to go shopping, work, et cetera, et cetera. So they're going to really pressure the people to get it. So as you guys both know, I'm sure Australia is going to be the test country and will be next, the UK and Canada. So I can easily see those kind of pressures happening in our countries too. So the question is, have you guys seriously thought about the what if? What if it gets to be that serious and they literally do say, okay, the vaccine's ready, you don't have to get it, or maybe even you do have to get it, but if they say the same thing that I just said, and you don't have to get it, but you just can't travel anymore or work or all those other things, have you guys thought out what you might do? You know, what are our options? Because I thought about it.
Yeah, of course. Well, okay. If you take the bulk of what Phil and I have been talking about, and basically we've highlighted just a fraction of the evidence, so to speak, that there have been nefarious agendas for a very long time that have not been in the general public's best interests, and that the system hasn't been designed the way you've been educated for you and your family and your society to flourish. If you start to grasp that, then it is easier for you to then contemplate that these people are many things, but stupid isn't one of them, and they've had an ultimate goal, and that ultimate goal they've not hidden at all, because they actually do believe in karma. So they believe if they show what they're doing, but they educate people to be stupid, then they are free of any spiritual combat because they've been telling you. So it is out there for you, but basically, there, as far as I can understand, after 30 years, there's been a very, very serious agenda, and maybe even these things at the top that come up with this actually believe that human beings are a parasite on the world. But that's basically what they've been convincing the world, that you're the problem, you're the ones caused all the problems, you're the ones who caused all the pollution, you're killing the earth, and every other thing to make you feel bad, insignificant, unworthy, and what have you. When in actual fact, the government's allowed all this to happen. So if there's any real, people to be charged, it will be people in the government. But nonetheless, if you recognize that there is an agenda, and the end game for them is to reduce the population significantly without being found out, then you get to see what this is all about. Because if people did start dropping dead in the millions for real in the second wave, they've primed the public to think that it's an invisible virus, when throughout history that I've looked at, it's always been chemical poisoning, very often administered by the doctors, that have caused the mass deaths, or unsanitary conditions and poverty and famine. Those are the key things, and then sort of war and utter stress. So if that is indeed their agenda, which millions now believe is the case, and they are in control, which I do not believe they are in control. I think they're panicking and have been forced to bring their agenda forward very quickly, and therefore they have exposed themselves in the age of Aquarius, where light is meant to see where the dark hit. That's what I think is really happening. But if they are in control, and this is a move to reduce or control the population, then and they succeed, then it is all in plain sight, and it is an act of war against human beings. What else could it possibly be considered when they are saying to you, you will not be able to shop or do normal things? And I think we don't have to define normal unless you're vaccinated with some electronic clean passport from tests that are absolutely wrong. Therefore, everything else is wrong. It is an act of war. And I think millions and millions of people around the world, and many of those will never, ever say this publicly or even like a post on Facebook, I believe they're aware of this, that it is an act of war against all people of all colors, all religious beliefs, all persuasions, all sexual persuasions, all dietary persuasion. It's an act of war. And I think what we have to, as a people, come together is agree on the common foundations of what is acceptable as the right to carry on our lives as we choose, and what is the right of government to intervene, because we seem to have forgotten worldwide that they're public fucking servants. But it's been flipped. They are public servants and they're not serving us, we're serving them. So we need to bring them back to accountability. We need to have people in place, I believe, that actually are very transparent, whereas we know how they all speak. I mean, politicians, for God's sake, I mean, they've all been trained to go, it's very clear now, that as long as you get the word clear in 3 times, then it's very clear. But I ask anybody around the world, because this is my mother's wisdom, how do you know when a politician's lying? Their mouth moves. And I think what's extraordinarily interesting about this moment in time is suddenly people have forgotten that. Most people don't trust politicians around the world, and now we're meant to believe everything that's coming out, and anybody who questions it is absolutely ridiculed. And I mean, the character assassinations should be enough for you to think, hang on, this is not unbiased, this is complete, utter biased propaganda. There must be an agenda, because there is. However, Thomas, I do believe it's a very positive thing happening. And although there may be some very rocky times ahead, I do believe, let's be almost biblical in our speech now. I do believe that the light will win. I do believe that ordinary people that would have never looked at possibly questioning that our governments are not working for us are now questioning, are our governments working for us? And I think that's a very positive thing. And I think it's a very necessary thing, because until all of us start to say, hey, we really are being controlled by people that we did not give our consent to, some major things have to happen until we once again put them in their place.
Well, my view on it, and I think Jeremy's spot on there. I have a little more of a sort of immature view on it. I just think that when we're in fear, we don't think of anything creative. Everybody knows that. When you're living in fear, there's no creativity, there's no logic, there's nothing like that. So that's how they keep us in this panic and obedient. Now, if, for example, I have bursts of anger, real anger, but most of the time I have just like head shaking, what on earth is going on, and moments of great humor. Excuse me a sec.
He's been summoned.
That's because he's been so hot-headed recently. He's setting off the smoke alarm.
No, you can hear the sizzling in the background. That's Detta cooking some steaks for the kids. And if you don't open the back door wide, it sets that off. Anyway, lucky it's right next to me, so I've turned it off. So good smoke alarm there. It's usually the timer for knowing when our food is done. But yes, I think that if we can get to a point where there's humor. I mean, I think one of the most beautiful things through this, Thomas, you and I and Jeremy can talk about all these sort of, let's all meditate and let's all get into these higher states of consciousness and all of that. There's plenty of channels out there if you want to go down that route and follow that. And I understand that, and it's fine, it's great. But for most people, I think humor is tremendous. I mean, what is the worst thing? Be it having a slap in the playground or having everyone laugh at you. The most humiliating thing is to have everybody just laugh at you. If everybody just burst out laughing at all of this nonsense and said, oh, don't be so ridiculous, it's a tremendous energy to get rid of these type of people. I remember back in the Gaddafi thing, you know, wherever it was, Libya or and Margaret Thatcher was, you know, and all this war and let's go and attack him and bomb him. And I actually wrote to her. I didn't know anything about politics. I haven't got a clue, but it seemed stupid to me. So I actually wrote her a letter and I said, listen, I've got this idea. Fill the planes up with these massive bombs that just all they do is fill up the palace with custard. So just swamp him out with custard, right? The whole world will laugh. The situation will be defused. And I think that would have been a great thing. I actually got a letter back, which you'd never get now. Your opinion has been noted, or what, it was so funny, from Downing Street. But anyway, I don't suppose it got anywhere near Margaret Thatcher, or that she would have been amused by it. But now I think my point with this is that if we can maintain a level of humor and a level of just disregard of it, like Tom Bombadil in Lord of the Rings, where he, you know, everybody was either terrified of the ring or they wanted it for themselves. He was just spacing around in the woods. He was probably in a huge state of consciousness. They came to him with, he put the ring on, he didn't even disappear. He didn't even give a damn, and he just gave it back and carried on singing and running around. If we can take away that power that they have over us of fear and just start laughing at these people, although it's a very serious situation, I think all these memes that come up and stuff are very healthy on Facebook, just taking the piss out of the whole thing, because it's not really just that you sit and laugh at them, but that maintains your creativity. And I think in time, when people are just laughing and not taking it seriously, the better ideas come up, you know, of exactly how to do it. If they try and bring out these forced facts, still be laughing at them at that point. And if then everybody's energy is up like that and not rooted in fear, some great creativity will come up. Humans are so creative. They'll develop, like there's these apps that you can program now that mimic the test and trace ones. You can just program in and find and say where you are instead of being tracked, you know, things like that. These great things that come up, these ways of faking the vaccine will come up. There will be a lot of casualties if it goes that far. There'll be a lot of casualties. But I think that if we can keep that kind of vibration up, not in a wafty, airy fairy spiritual kind of way, but just in laughing at these fucking idiots, you know, and their lunacy, and then we'll stay creative and something will come up, you know, somebody somewhere will have that genius that they wouldn't have had if they were in fear. There will be that what was his name, who the Terminator had to go back in time and get rid of, you know, who was going to sort out and get rid of the whole of this Skynet or whatever it was called. You know, there's so much there in films these days. You look at films very differently when you see this stuff. And that would be my answer. I would say just, you know, maintain a level of consciousness. If you don't have any idea how to do this, or that's not your bag, just laugh as much as you can at the absurdity of it. And stay out of the fear. And if we stay out of the fear, it'll find a way somehow, you know? It'll find a way. Fear is their greatest weapon. Take that away from them, and then the rest will crumble in time. That's what I feel.
So you're optimistic that more people will awaken to this to the point where it will crumble? Because obviously, I'm still estimating that about 80% of the population around the planet still is in fear and believes in the whole pandemic.
Well, the trouble is most of the ones who've woken up are still in fear. You know, they're woken up to it, so then they get in fear. Instead of being in fear of a virus, now they're in fear of the whole everything collapsing. And of course, we have our moments of that. I have my moments, mostly because of the kids, and I think, what sort of a world have I brought them into? I look at my amazing kids, and I think of my great childhood, and I think, oh my God. But then I think all we can do is just laugh at it, not take it seriously, and fight when we have to, and just express stuff, you know, express stuff in any way that we can. I've had friends say, what's the point of posting this on Facebook? What's the point of doing? It's just, you know, you're the cog in the wheel. You okay, you know, it's not some great power, but it takes one person. Somebody's got to take that mask off first. You know, I'll go to jail before I put a mask on. I will. And I'll die before they come to my kids with a vaccine. But in the meantime, I will laugh at this insanity that comes out of the mainstream media every day, because it's barking mad.
All right. Well, with that said, I appreciate the time that you've both given me to express your views. And I'm hoping that maybe we can do this once again. And I guess it's time to wrap up. I will put some links to the Human Unleashed site and others once I've made this video. So I hope that the people watching this have learned a few interesting things. And I guess until next time, thanks very much, guys.
It's been our pleasure.
Thanks for having us on, Thomas.
Okay, take care now.